everyone. Welcome back to my live writing test series. Let's see what we have for today. The gap between the rich and the poor is becoming wider. The rich are becoming richer and the poor are becoming poorer. What problems can this cause and what can be done to reduce this gap? Okay, so I think it's been a long while since I've done a problem solution essay. So this should be fun. Problem solution essays do tend to be a little bit larger compared to the usual discursive, opinion, advantage, disadvantage, etc. Of course, they don't always have to be. There are many good ways to write an essay, and anything that I do is just my own way of doing things. There's no boilerplate or standard method. Don't just assume that if I'm doing it this way, that's the only way to do it. For all you know, your methods might also be, good. So again, I can't say that for sure unless, of course, I have a look at what you're doing. But, well, anyway, let's begin with this. That's obviously a very, this is a very common theme about income gaps or differences or society's issues regarding wealth gaps. I mean, there's nothing particularly rare or uncommon about a theme like this. So you should be aware. You should have some talking points, about something of this sort, right? It's not something extremely you will never, of course, get a question that's very rare or something. And again, if this theme, if you look at this question and it seems, difficult to you or tricky in some way, or if you have a negative reaction to it, what I would suggest is start reading more. Yeah. In fact, I just checked, and this is only like our third problem solution essay. That's quite a shame. Why do I have so few problem solutions? Anyway, I think that's just because they're less common. Obviously, opinion essays, discursive essays, they are super common. Every week when you check, online, which kind of questions have come out, when our students tell us, I had this question, I had that question, almost always it's either it's either opinion or discursive. So, it's not surprising. But yeah, like I said before, that you cannot guesstimate or assume you're going to get a specific question type. So yeah, without yapping too much more, let me get on with today's theme. So yeah, as I was saying, try and read more. That's like the most important thing. And I'm saying this through experience because I'm learning other languages at the time, and that's what helps me. I mean, just today, my teacher for my German course, I'm just doing an A2 course, and if you know anything about the CEFR, A2 is just a beginner. You have A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. So I'm just set at A2. I still have to take the exam in April, but she said right away, "Don't worry, your level is above A2." I mean that is really high praise. But how did I get there? I wouldn't say I'm particularly special. I don't even do my homework on time. So yeah, if any of my students are watching this, and yeah, you can kind of tell me about how I don't do my own homework as well. But hey, you have to do yours on time. Them's the rules. Okay, so how did I get there? I was only able to have her, completely out of the blue. We were just talking about the exam, and she's like, "Don't worry, your level is above an A2, and I haven't even taken the exam, the final exam yet, Why do you think that is? Not because I'm particularly gifted or something like that. Yeah, some people do have an aptitude for languages. I might be one of them, but there's no test as far as I know to test that kind of thing. But I can, read so much content. I push myself to read even if I don't understand something. You don't have to understand every single word to enjoy reading. Yeah, I know if you look at something and, 50% of the content is new, strange words, it can be very boring. I understand that because I've been there. But you start by reading things that are at the appropriate level. So if you're someone who's watching this and you're not a student of mine, what I would recommend is finding your CEFR level. You can I think there's a quiz on the British Council website. I'm not sure. It's been a while since I've had to send anyone one of those tests. But yeah, just Google find my CEFR English. do one of those tests. The great thing about English is there is so much content. English is the default language basically of the internet and media. So once you find out what CEFR level you're at, and by the way, I would recommend not preparing for the IELTS at the moment if your CEFR level is below B2. So if you're getting A2, B1, something like that, ignore the IELTS for now. Focus on just improving your English. IELTS courses or IELTS preparation, whether you're doing it by yourself, whether you have a teacher, they're really only for people who are at a B2 level or above. It doesn't make any sense to teach someone about how to write an essay when they can barely string together, a coherent sentence with one dependent clause. So those things are really important. No institute will tell you that because of course they just want you to enroll, and that's all they're concerned about. But in the interest of the public, I felt that it's something people should know. And once you figure out what your level is, you can just find out, like type in B2 graded readers, and you'll find tons of books. They don't always have to be like, fiction books. Yeah, you can also find, there's places where they have articles. I think, gosh, when I find it, I'll probably just add the link in the description, but I know for sure there was a website where you could read basic versions of some kind of news. You could read an intermediate version and you could read an advanced version. So once I find that, I'll probably just add the link below in the description. I think it's, I don't know, I guess it was BBC or something, but I don't know. Anyway, and of course consume content as much as you can. If you don't like reading, you can listen, you can watch content also. Those are all perfectly valid. Okay, so as I was saying, let me get started with my I'll write my sentences first, so it's easier for me that way. But of course, you can write your introduction first. That's whatever works for you, everyone's different. So first I'm going to write about my okay, why does this problem exist? Why is there this income gap or wealth gap? Notice how they're not saying that the wage gap is increasing, nor are they saying that the wealth gap is increasing. So you shouldn't specifically say they earn less money, because you don't necessarily have to earn money to have money. You can have it inherited, you can have anything else that gives you a passive income, etc. So this is not specifically about wage, payment, salary gaps. In fact, I would say it's more likely to be about the existing wealth, net worth gaps between the rich and the poor. So what's the biggest difference? I think, what's the biggest reason for this kind of disparity in wealth? I think it's largely because of poor economic policies. Now, that's my default statement for anything that's related to, wealth or human suffering in a lot of cases. But that's because I've studied economics. So saying that could be easy for me. I could easily write 100 words on poor economic policies. You may not be able to, and that's okay. You may have a different reason. Okay, so there's no list of reasons that they're checking and seeing, is this a good reason, is this a bad reason. So don't worry, everyone's different, everyone's knowledge. You might know more about I don't know, the internet than I do, for example, right? Or you might know more about gardening than I do. And maybe if you have an essay about, let's say, healthcare, and you're a doctor, you would naturally have an advantage in knowing about that stuff, right? So there's nothing, you don't have to have specialist knowledge about anything. You just need general knowledge. Now I'm just writing whatever comes easiest to me, and you would do the same thing. Yeah. Poor economic policies are largely to blame for ever increasing gaps, for the ever increasing the ever increasing disparity. I can't see my cursor. Okay. Between the rich and the poor. Okay, why is it bold? Okay, so that's my main idea. Let me think. Poor economic policies, and I'm going to have to explain what exactly I mean. For example, poor taxation, distribution. Okay, distribution of a distribution of, I would say, there's this idea that taxation is perfect and you take money from people who have more of it and you give it to those who have less of it, but it's just an idea. It never really works out that way. It's not perfect even in other places. So distribution of, what's that, welfare benefits, or not necessarily benefits, but distribution. I would rather say taxation is one thing, and you have, for example, direct taxes, indirect taxes, wealth taxes, everything, all of that, long-term capital gains, blah blah blah. What else? Now, when you actually get to thinking about things, you tend to realize, oh, this is much more complex than I initially thought. Complex isn't a bad thing, by the way. By complex, I just mean it's got many different, layers and facets to it. Okay, let's see, what can I do here? As I was saying, poor taxation. Yeah, by poor taxation, I just mean, for example, in many places there's no wealth tax. Even if there was a 0.5% type of wealth tax, and it's not just about taking money, it's about giving money. Yes, so my point about distribution was correct. Distribution of money and benefits. In an ideal system, you would probably have, anyway, that's all very hypothetical, so I don't want to discuss that. For economic policies, what else? Lack of, let's say inflation. It's increasing everywhere, right? Even in developed countries where inflation rarely hits, beyond 2%, 3%, you're seeing 6%, 7% inflation. In some places like Argentina, it's like 200% or something like that. That's just crazy. I can't even imagine. So yeah, poor management. I'm using the word poor, but that's okay. This is just like notes, yeah? So poor management of monetary policy. Okay, I'll just write inflation, so it's simpler for you to understand. Okay, and then my second main idea is going to be about what happens as a result of this. Increasing gaps, social unrest is a major thing. People, it's like basically rich versus poor. People tend to distrust each other, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that, oh, I hate Jeff Bezos or something like that. You see a lot of people online, Twitter, Facebook, etc. They post about all these things like, oh, it's so ridiculous, these people are going out to space and whatever, blah blah blah, and then money could be used for something else. In a way, you don't really have the right to tell someone else what they can do with their money, but there's this growing resentment and hatred, like very very public hatred. Like it's not like, okay, I don't like that person, but it's like, wow, I actively, like, people are saying that they actively wish harm upon someone. That's really worrisome. It's dangerous, because that's not how society should be, right? So I think it's leading to, this is not the only thing. When wealth is concentrated, policies that are created benefit only the wealthy. Almost works out that way. Have you heard of, for example, what's that called? Anyway, I forgot the name. It's some kind of, yes, have you heard of, for example, the Davos conferences, and what else? There's all these things I would rather not get into right now, because it's gonna be boring for many people to hear. But anyway, when wealth is concentrated into a few hands, is a bit of a casual term. I don't want to use that. Into a few, let's say, sectors or areas, or when the top 1% of the world own more than half of your resources, there's a major problem, right? Because if you don't own resources, whether that's wealth whether that's land, capital, right? I mean, if you've ever been to college, you've probably been told about the haves and the have-nots. I think it's something that was popularized by Karl Marx, although I don't necessarily think Karl Marx was right about everything, but it's interesting to think about, yeah. So when wealth is when wealth is concentrated into a few hands, I don't necessarily want to use this, but maybe I'll change it later. For me, it's good enough. It leads to, I mean, it's just, let's see, okay. Policies that benefit, or more likely, or let me think of some other way to phrase this. If wealth is concentrated into just a few hands, it leads to policy making that benefits only the rich at the expense of the poor. This is generally longer than what I would recommend someone to write, but like I said, for me it's okay. If I were teaching this, I would probably teach it a little bit differently, but then this is not a teaching lesson. Sorry, my throat is still bad. I really don't know why. And then the last one, what can be done to fix the problem? Again, whatever is responsible for causing the problem has to be changed. So, need to be completely reformed. The whole idea that the government is some source of power, I think that is an interesting thing to think about, but one must consider, why do we have governments? They serve society, right? Not the other way around, right? It has an important role in any country, in any society, but there have to be changes. Yeah, if your government is like, let's say it's so common, you read about it all the time. For example, during like the American elections, you read about how there's a corn industry and they're, paying people. They're paying senators and whatnot. Of course, the voting systems are different everywhere, but no one should be allowed to canvass for votes, right? No one should be allowed to buy policies, essentially. So governments need to be completely reformed from the ground up. Okay, that's a bit of a casual term. I don't want to use that. Need to be completely reformed to ensure that they understand. They let me see. This might be a bit too broad, and in case it is, I'll probably change it. But I think for now, it's okay. Although, again, I don't recommend changing the main idea, because of course it's kind of a risky thing to do. But I can do it. I'm fine with it because it's easy enough for me. Okay, so what policies businesses are favored? And what else? At the expense of the poor. That's a really important point, because a lot of people depend on nature, like in more let's say, okay, in poorer countries or in still developing countries, many people actually depend on agriculture. They depend on the water from rivers. They may not have a fixed water source, right? Stuff like that. But then these companies, for example, Nestle in Australia, I think they own natural water resources. Can you imagine? That's the most ridiculous thing. How do you own something that belongs to the people? And talking about a country like Australia, where they already have issues with water, that's crazy when you think about it. So, policy making that benefits only the rich. like unemployment benefits. I'm just gonna use the short forms. That's fine. Unemployment benefits. Food stamps, disability benefits, etc. Because where does the government get the money from, right? If people don't pay into it, then what they can't do anything. They can't just get money out of thin air. Poor tax code, rather, I think. I'll just say that. And I mean, you don't have to write so much. I'm just writing this so you can understand what I mean. And what else? When you actually have to think about very specific points, you start to realize, okay, I had these ideas running in my mind, but when I put them down on paper, it's kind of different. Okay, when wealth is concentrated into a few hands, it creates policy making that benefits only the rich at the expense of the poor. For example, mining for lithium and rare minerals, any kind of mining. For example, I saw this documentary where in Africa they have these people come up in and work in mines. There's some kind of metal that's used, I don't know, metal or mineral rather, that's used in beauty, in the beauty industry, the field. I don't know, I think it's mica or something, I guess. And it's, of course, the companies are rich, but at what cost, right? Because they're not even paying the laborers a lot of money. So I think that might be something I could write, but let's see. I had so many ideas, but it needs to be something you can very clearly explain. Don't pick something that's vague or unclear. Yeah, you've got to be careful about that. So yeah, normally I shouldn't take so much time, but I'm not really putting a timer on myself. But if I should set a timer or something, I could probably do that as well. You can just let me know what you would prefer. So taxes, okay, laws favoring businesses, or even the fact that I think it's called gerrymandering, where a business is, of course, it's not allowed everywhere, but let's say you're the owner of an extremely successful business and you make a so-called donation to a specific party or something. So again, that's yep. Okay. I'm just gonna leave that be. I'm not gonna bother with that. The simpler you keep your explanation, the better it is. Okay, any ideas here? Let me see. Tax favoring businesses, that's a major thing. What else? Oh yeah, they can, for example, labor laws are frequently exploited as well. Right? It's because they can, fines, for example. Fines are another example of, fines are okay for the rich, can destroy the poor. Any kind of law, imagine, just think of any law that has a fine but doesn't have a jail term. So what is that? What is the fine? Do you think a fine of a couple $100 is really going to make any kind of dent in someone's net worth if they're worth a couple million or more? What is a fine? A fine is simply there's this quote I can't remember, but a fine is simply the cost of doing business. That's what they say. And so again, a wealthy person, you can, for example, there's parking in London is very difficult, especially in the central areas. So you can't just park there. There's a ridiculous fine you have to pay. But who is the fine for? Is the fine of not a form of social exclusion, because you're ensuring that the people who can park there, park, not exactly, because parking is actually not allowed in some areas, not everywhere, of course, but people who want to park can just pay a fine, right? So then you really think, okay, well, this really leads to more and more divisions, right? Leads to policy making that benefits only the rich, can destroy the poor. Okay, there we go. And then Uh, um, um, no unlimited power, egalitarian structure, laws to be made after referendums. There you go. I think that's good enough. What can be done to reduce this gap? I don't know. This is a little bit vague, so maybe I'll change my main idea as I was saying earlier. So, what can be done to reduce this gap? How do you reduce the gap? Well, obviously, policies need to change. That's kind of a dead giveaway. Policy reform is the only way. I have said, okay, but policy, I know it's a very important term. You might find it kind of annoying that I'm using it so often, but that's what it is. Laws and structures of society, not society, but laws and, let me see, not necessarily just the law, but, let me think. Laws and policies need to change. We also have to be changed to ensure a more egalitarian. I know, I've repeated that. Structure. For example, I just I'm reminded of something that I read once. Fines should be based on percentage of your income. I think somewhere in Finland or Norway this practice exists. That because obviously, just think, right? If you have a monetary amount for your fine, it's not a big deal for someone who earns a ton of money or has a ton of wealth, right? But if it's based on percentage, let's say you're smoking somewhere you shouldn't. Okay, well that's 2% of this month's income, right? It hits you the same way, regardless of how much you earn, regardless of where you are in that system. So I think that's brilliant. That is really something which could help a lot. Tax reform. What I mean by tax reform is, again, that's really a very tricky thing, and you never can really explain it in just one sentence, as anyone who studied economics can tell you. So I think this is pretty good, but I don't know. I'll just change that to be more specific about the monetary differences. So. Yeah, I don't think everyone should have it. It's always the case anyway. Taxes are usually progressive. I don't think flat taxes should be a good thing. So flat taxes and greater investment. I think that business. Do they need reform? Because it is possible. I'm sure you've heard there are many companies which, are headquartered in a specific country, and then they really say that, we've had so many losses, and they don't pay any tax. And you as a person are probably paying 20, 30, 40, maybe even 50% of your income in tax. That's ridiculous, right? So business taxes do need some kind of reform. There we go. I have my essay planned out. Now all I have to do is write. So I'm going to first start my introduction. Despite all the knowledge we have basically about how income gaps and wage gaps are bad or not ideal, this practice is still extremely common. Whether it's an income gap, whether it's a wealth gap. Oops, just a sec. Okay, right. So disparity between economic classes. It's always been there, though. It's nothing new. Disparity between economic classes has always existed, but governments have also set themselves a goal to reduce this gap in by well, I don't know, let me just remove this. I'm not sure about this. Disparity has always existed, although simultaneously have also tried to do what can be done to decrease these gaps. Okay, this is a bit larger than what I would like, but there's again nothing wrong with writing something more, so that's like okay. Disparities always exist. Okay, have also tried to do what can be done. Tried to, I would rather just say decrease these gaps. However, they haven't been. Okay, and then let me talk about largely due to, okay, mainly due to this results in the chasm a range of economic tools or a complete overhaul go. And then I have my first main idea, so I'm just gonna take it as it is. Oops. Okay. Increasing disparity with rich and poor, and then poor. Okay, I have my ideas. I think taxation is the first thing. Distribution of benefits. Yeah, this is fine. Or maybe I can just do it this way. It's probably better. There we go. And the most important, it has a lot of power. The most powerful tool is perhaps used the most in the most inappropriate fashion. Allow the rich to benefit. The rich, capital or business owning classes to benefit from them, while at the same time depriving the salaried and generally poorly endowed from a good salaried and generally poorly endowed classes. If you run a business any kind, you probably pay less tax than someone who has a salary, because you get to decide what kind of deductions you want if you run a business. But if you have a salary, then that's just good. Let me take a big chunk of that. That's how it works. So that needs some kind of overhaul. In addition to that, yet another reason for this gap, rather, for chasm, gap, whatever, divide for the ever-increasing. Inflation is a reality. It will always exist, whether it's 0.1% or whether it's 10%, you know. Gaps. Okay, I'm just gonna read what I've written because I don't want there to be any mistakes. For economic policies, most powerful tool, taxation, is perhaps used in the most inappropriate fashion, as most tax codes, not every tax code, yeah. Most tax codes allow the rich, capital owning or business owning classes to benefit from them, at the same time depriving salaried and generally poorly endowed in terms of not owning land, not owning capital, etc., or not owning like a factory or something, for example. Yet another reason for this ever increasing for this disparity. Yet another reason, blame can also be equally assigned. Can also be assigned to. I've already said okay. In most parts of in some of the most, in societies where this income gap is particularly high, blame can also be assigned to the awful management of monetary policy, which leads to ever increasing. For example, you must have heard of how Turkey is facing inflation, ridiculous inflation of 49%. That there's an absolute crisis, and why does the crisis exist? Because of inflation, right? The value of your money is just no longer, you cannot buy things anymore. Maybe yesterday you were able to buy 3 loaves of bread, but suddenly next week you only buy 1, and it's the same amount of money, right? Or some money is losing worth. Of course, that's not the only reason why money loses worth. There's many other possibilities, like your country is facing sanctions, and whatever maybe your your exports aren't doing so well, or there can be a whole bunch of, it's very complicated, like I said, but a good basic explanation is fine enough. This is just a very tiny essay, not a huge thesis, yeah. Blame can also be assigned to the awful management of monetary policy, which leads to ever increasing inflation in some of the worst affected countries. In countries where this disparity is the widest. In countries, yeah, such as, for example, take any country, right? You have any developing country, Brazil, Philippines, China, India. We have Turkey, for example, also Russia. Anytime you have to give an example, please write the example right next to the noun, yeah? Where this disparity is the widest, the gap between someone who's filthy rich and absolutely, poor, it's huge. Blame can also be assigned to the awful management of monetary policy, which leads to ever-increasing inflation in countries such as where the disparity is the widest. Or actually, well, I should give a more relevant example. Inflation exists, but I think I would rather talk about Argentina, right? Like I said, I just gave... Sorry, just a sec. Like I said, the inflation is like 100 or 200%. So, the disparity is the widest. I don't know really. I mean, I'm just maybe I'll just remove this. What do you think? I think that's fine. I think that's okay. As the rich can weather the inflation, it's fine. They're not going to die. They're not going to eat less food, right? Internet. Okay, and finally okay, this is like kind of huge, but that's just, by now you should know that's how I write. the distribution of resources from the government to those who need it, such as disabled people, new parents. Well, I don't know, I mean, not every time, but yeah, disabled people, homeless people, those who are unemployed, the unemployed, distribution of resources from the government to those who need it, such as disabled people, homeless people, the unemployed, et al. Et al. Is a shortened form of the longer French form. This is fine, it's like basically like etc. I avoid writing etc., but et al. Sounds pretty nice, so I'm gonna keep it. It's just a stylistic choice, there's nothing wrong with using etc. Okay, but etc. is kind of lazy, don't you think? Yeah, A, B, C, etc. Yeah, etc. basically means I don't know anything more. So yeah, avoid that. Disabled people. Okay, what was I saying? It's equally important to note that the distribution of resources from the government to those who need it is largely is not planned well, and even pensioners, right? People do not receive nearly enough money or other benefits to ensure their survival. Like, just think, what's the average pension? That barely pays your rent, right? Or let's say if you, again, that's true in pretty much any country. The degree to which it's insufficient can vary. Maybe they're giving you money, but it's like it only meets 70% of your, expenses, versus another country where it doesn't even meet 10% of your expenses. So of course the difference can vary, but almost no one who receives government benefits is 100% satisfied. Okay, and finally, it is clear that most policies, most existing, let's say, do not serve people well. There we go. Kinda huge, but that's how it is. And the next one, it's almost an hour since I began. But I'll finish this pretty quickly because there's basically not much left to do. And again, laws, bad tax code, fines. Yeah, I think this is maybe this should be number one. Yeah, because where do you get money from? That's the most important thing. Government cannot help its people if there's no money coming in, right? So, a bad tax code. I'm just gonna shorten like the text size here. Should I click on? Okay. Just so I can see it all. Okay, most importantly, when wealth, okay, powerful, I already said, okay. As discussed earlier, as mentioned earlier, taxation is immensely powerful, but only when applied correctly. Most tax codes allow for businesses and those with capital to easily claim maybe for things as shady, well, not shady, but what's that called? Launder. To avoid taxation. Ooh. most modern tax codes allow for businesses. Yeah, it is common knowledge that most large businesses, such as Amazon, quickly underreport their tax liabilities and even enjoy it. Okay, this was supposed to be one sentence, but this is so huge. Yeah, they even pay no taxes. What's up? Okay, there we go. That's good enough. Similarly, it is possible for those in power, for those with, wealth or capital, to in effect finance the ruling and obtain special concessions or permissions to do what they want to at the expense of the local natural resources, such as Nestle, which owns most fresh water in Australia. Let me read this. It is possible for those with wealth or capital to, in effect, finance ruling governments and obtain special concessions or permissions to do what they want to at the expense of local natural resources. Nestle, which owns most fresh water in Australia, which, of course, prevents the local populace from being able to benefit from these what's VUM today? Thomas, I've just read your message, but I don't know what you're trying to say. I guess you could just try typing that again. Yeah, okay, that's good enough. That's a huge paragraph, my god. Why can I never write something tiny? Anyway, and the last one, fines. Okay, another, it is often claimed, it is popular knowledge, basically, right? Fine is merely a cost of doing. You can Google this. It's very funny. A fine is merely a cost of doing business. In practice, a fine is not a fine is not going to prevent a person who has the financial resources from doing something they want to. But it can and does absolutely cripple a person who comes from a weak, or who has a weak who has a weak financial status or something like that. A fine is not going to, rather can be, will not. Oh, financial capacity. Look, you see how it is when you write something, you might overlook a couple of things sometimes. But it can and absolutely does. Let's say that you've done something wrong, you get slapped with a fine, it's a few $1,000s, and your net worth is not even $1,000. That's going to cripple you, not just for this year, but like it has an impact on your entire future, right? Cripple a person who has a weak financial status, not just for a couple months, but possibly even for decades or their entire life. Therefore, it's okay, yeah. Well, I mean, you can write a conditional sentence, you can write another type, it doesn't really matter, right? Okay, so wealth is concentrated, yeah. If the poor are basically disenfranchised, in a way. Those who are strong, let's see, those who are allowed to flourish at the expense of those, oh gosh, but only because of the misery of those beneath them. And finally, laws and plans have to be changed. Okay, laws and plans need to be changed to ensure a more egalitarian structure in society. The most effective solution would be to, okay, so I've talked about fines, tax reform. Tax reform stays. If I've said taxes are most important, then that should be my number one idea, right? That makes sense. So it's going to be 3, that's going to be 2, that's going to be 1. Okay, so the most effective solution would be to implement tax code reforms as soon as possible, as it is the major source of revenue, and it is only from revenue that any social programs or goals can be achieved. Flat taxes. One example of such a reform, or rather you can say tax code reforms. It should care should be taken to ensure that the tax burden is equitably and for this reason flat taxes should be abolished. They are equal but not equitable. It hits you harder. Let's say if you, because fixed costs, right? You have to pay a certain amount of rent, electricity, blah blah blah. There's of course a window. You might pay more for electricity if you have a bigger house or whatever else, but there's a bare minimum amount of money you have to spend. If you have to spend $1,000 a month just to survive and you're earning $1,200, it's different compared to if you absolutely must spend $1,000 to survive but you earn $5,000. So taxation should definitely be different, but when it comes to fines, that's a little bit of a different concept. That's why you might be wondering, oh, but why should flat taxes be removed? Yeah, okay, anyway, I'll just go ahead and continue with this. So because it has to do with utility of money and stuff like that. I don't want to explain it because it's too much. A simple explanation is useful enough, such as abolishing flat tax rates, there we go. Care should be taken equitably distributed. And then business taxes. Yeah, similarly, have I already used similar? I feel like I have. Let me see. Oh yeah, I have. Okay. taxes are a major source of well, I would rather say it's an area where lots of cheating takes place. So another cause for concern, and companies need to be prevented from taking undue advantage of the law. By ensuring only legitimate are allowed, and perhaps also by making it necessary for them to pay into a social development fund. Yeah, regardless of, let's say, there's revenue and then there's profit, so maybe regardless of, because they often say that, you know, okay, that there's ways to reduce your profit, you know, complete legal ways, by the way, but yeah, oops, what's this? By making it necessary for them to pay into a social development fund regardless of their profits. Yeah. Again, that would of course depend. You cannot say that every single company has to pay, let's say, 1,000 euros every month. No, but yeah, some kind of, you know, amount. Pay some percentage of their revenue, maybe some percentage of their profits. But then, yeah, that's the problem with, you know, saying profits, because you can easily show I have no profits, I only have losses. And finally, reform. It is not just taxation which needs reform. It is also necessary to change the system of fines. As fines, arbitrary amounts are not reasonable and do not prevent. Yeah, I've already explained that. Instead, it would be more effective to maybe arrange taxes, or to ensure that fines correspond to a person's income, which would not only increase the amount of money, I mean, yeah, not for every single person, but which likely, let's say likely, which would likely not only increase the amount of money earned through fines, money earned, but also make it more equitable for, you know, offenders. Just because you're an offender doesn't mean you should, you know, be made bankrupt or something, you know. Okay, and then the wealth gaps can be filled up. You can, you know, decrease. Wealth gaps can be decreased only through the right, let's say, systems and ideas. Systems and, you know, plans. That's good enough. And there we go. Finally, my conclusion. So it is evident that why do we have? Okay, let me just see. Before you can pause. Okay. Centuries of poor decisions by those in power have only made the gaps between between the wealthy and not so wealthy. So centuries of poor decisions by those in power have only made the difference between the wealthy and not so wealthy much bigger. And this in turn creates a vicious circle, really. We frame all existing laws to ensure greater equity. If such changes are not made soon, there may very well be social unrest that reaches a point of no return. There we go. There we go. So it's been an hour and 15 minutes. I know it took a bit more time, but this was okay. This is like much bigger than I anticipated it. I did not really want to write so much, but it just, the words just flowed. I have no idea why I wrote this much. But anyway, I'm just gonna scroll so you can have a look at all the paragraphs. Again, if you get an essay like this, then you know what kind of content you can include. You can maybe take a couple ideas from here, you know. You can pause to check this. That's paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, and then the conclusion. And this one's huge. I think this is probably the biggest one I've written so far. I'm sure this is like around 500. Not to... Okay, oh my god, what? That's impossible. How is it 744 words? That's a lot. 744? That's crazy. Gosh. Yeah, I'm kind of speechless. Okay, ideally a paragraph would only be this much, maybe, right? For you, I mean, obviously when you have 40 minutes and a different skill set. Okay, but this is like 60 or something? Gosh, that's huge. It seems like every time I just write something bigger and bigger. But anyway, that's all okay. The main goal is just for you to get all these ideas. And that's like their whole essay, 237 words just for one paragraph. That's crazy. Okay. Okay. All right. Not too shabby. Great. Okay, well, next time I'll take maybe another type of essay, not a problem solution one. Well, I mean, I'm just gonna pick what's, the latest. So, I mean, I don't necessarily pick a question from what I already have, because I have, of course, I need to teach people, so I have bunches of questions, files and files of questions from all these years, but I only pick the latest questions. It's either something that a student has told me they received or something my assistant finds for me. Well, so I'll see you next week for an essay, but yes, if you would like to come back on Saturday, sometime in the evening, I'll also be doing a speaking test. That'll of course be quite short, or just around 15 to 20 minutes or so. Great, alright.